Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, myself, Mark Young. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Bronco League Baseball. Bronco League Baseball was big growing up. It was a very huge part of my childhood. There was a lot of competitive people in the small town of Western Pennsylvania. There was a lot of great friends that I've made through playing Little League Baseball. This was actually Bronco League Baseball, a little bit different. We came up through the ranks with Little League. I think it was 7, 8, and 9-year-olds. And then Bronco League was 10, 11, and 12-year-olds, which was kind of nice because, you only had 3-year gap with other kids that you were playing with. So it gave you a shot of winning, kind of level the playing field just because of the age. You only had an age 1 or 2 different than yours. So you had a chance to win at every level, which I always thought was good. There was plenty of kids to choose from in the Mon Valley at that time. There were several teams that I can go over a little bit later in this podcast. But those were some really great years. I have to tell you, I really enjoyed those years. Little League, not so much, just due to all the confusion and being, 7, 8, 9 years old. Really didn't know what to expect. But as you got older into the Bronco League, that's when it really got serious. I remember coming up before I was 10 years old, and my dad was a coach, Coach Young. They would always tell him, how do you do this so long? What's your strategy? How are you going to go about picking a team? And he would go away to his meetings, and he'd come back, and he'd show me the roster, and I'd be like, wow, that looks like a great roster. Don't know who these kids are, but looks like a great roster. I did know some of them. But some of them I didn't know, and that's where they went to go draft. I think they went to go draft on the Ravens Club. I think that's the name of it. But some of the names of the teams that played back then, and we're going back to 1976, 77, 78, back when I was 10, 11, and 12, we had Federal Credit, we had Kiwanis, we had a team called the Ravens, a.k.a. the Green Machine. They were a big nemesis of ours. We had Elks, we had Yoba, but the team I played for is, drum roll please, Lou Dodge, also known as the Orange Crush. Boy, if you played for Lou Dodge, everyone knew who you were. It was just a saying back in the day. You grew up in a valley and you're like, oh, you're Mark from Lou Dodge. You're Mike from Lou Dodge. That was my dad's name. That was my brother's name. I had cousins that played, Joe, Kevin, Ricky, Lou Dodge. Your name just became synonymous with Lou Dodge. And when that came up, you played baseball in the summer months, right after school. Towards the end of school, I'd say it was probably, May, June, July. Probably wrapped it up in early August, probably late July, from what I can remember. But the teams were kind of, they were really paired equally back then, I'd say, because everyone knew everyone's skills. If you were on the team and your father coached like I had, you were called an automatic. So if my dad was the coach, I was an automatic pick. He didn't have to draft me. There was, other coaches that were my best friend's father. They were automatics as well. I can go with David, Jimbo, stuff like that people were just so in tune to that they couldn't wait for the season to start. There was just a vibe around town was Bronco League starting. That's the big leagues. Even though it really wasn't to us when you're 10, 11 years old, that was definitely the big leagues. So I can remember, one of the first games whenever I was 10 years old, shaking in my boots, waiting to take the field with the Bronco League. And we had a lot of people out in the stands back then too. People would come with their lawn chairs. People would come with their hats. They'd come with their umbrellas. They'd come with their binoculars. They'd come with their food, even though there was a concession stand up there. But we played in a park called Tot Lot. Some people called it Columbus Park, but it was called Tot Lot to us. And that's where all the games were played because all these teams were from Monessen. Back then, you had probably 10, 12 players per team. And what did I name? About 7 or 8 teams. So that's a lot of kids back in the 70s. Once again, I say this a lot, but the mills were thriving and things were just good back then. And people had jobs and kids were all over the place. And it was just a good time. I know one of my first memories of being 10 years old is waiting to put on my uniform. I would think about it towards the end of school going, wow, after I'm done with school, I'll be donning my Lou Dodge uniform. Years before that, I was a ball boy. Like a bat boy, I would collect the bats and the balls at the end of, practice. or I would pick up the bat at the end of an at-bat for somebody. So, I wasn't officially on Lou Dodge's team till probably 1976, whenever I was 10 years old. But before then, I was a ball boy for probably 3 or 4 years. My brother played for a few years, and my dad coached a long time. But definitely was wearing the Lou Dodge uniform. And sometimes you wore it on the days you didn't even play because they canceled a game, but you had to go up there to see if they canceled a game. So you'd put your uniform on, even though it's raining out, it's going to get canceled, but you wore it for that half hour that you were there and back. So that was just a good feeling. A lot of other memorable moments was just the camaraderie. We always had clashes of big teams. There was always us against Ravens. Ravens, the big green machine versus the Orange Crush. And one of the best parts about playing Bronco League baseball is the parents actually got into it. They actually welcomed the challenge of other parents. So, my father was best friends with Jimbo's dad, and, your CIO's coach, best friends with my dad, Federal Credit. They were all friends, and they just loved to have the competition between them. And I'm sure when they were at the mill working, they'd always talk about it and couldn't wait for the day to come to play ball. And just like we thought about it all day at school. I mean, we talked about it during school, we talked it at recess, and then after being at school with my friends all day, 2 hours later, we're showing up at the ball field saying we're finally here and we made it. So we couldn't wait to get it started. That's just some of the memories that I remember. There are some memorable moments. I like to call myself as an average baseball player. I thought I was probably a lot better than average, but I think I was just average. I only hit 1 home run over my 3-year period. But I was more known for my arm strength and my speed for the bases. But hitting, not so much. I mean, I can get a single here or there. I could get a double here or there. But, my strength was stealing bases and pitching. Just for some reason, I had a strong arm. I was tall and lanky, and I could just throw the ball. I mean, you don't have to be big and strong to throw the ball. You just need to have that buggy whip style and just fire it in there. I did have a problem with control, though, but that was fine. Only had a problem with control with left-handed batters, which I thought was odd. But if you're a left-handed batter against me, chances are you're going to get hit. And I fully knew this. I'm like, oh, man. Sorry, Billy's up, and he's left-handed. I know he's probably going to get hit by the pitch. And yes, he did get beaned. So that was just one of many that I would hit as I pitched. But, one of the moments I remember in 12th grade was I was undefeated. I went 8-0 as a pitcher. One time I might have had a no-hitter. I can't remember. I know one time I had a one-hitter. A couple times I had a one-hitter. There was one time that I went 4 for 4. I think I hit for the cycle that year. That was probably my last year, championship year. I hit a home run, double and a single. Maybe not a triple, but maybe 2 doubles and a single in a home run. But those are the good times. It's one of those things where you couldn't wait to be 12 years old. You were 10, but you're like, man, when I'm 12, nobody's going to touch me. I'm going to be the fastest. I'm going to throw the hardest. I'm going to hit the furthest. I'm going to do everything I can to win the championship. And, there's a lot of ups and downs in that 10, 11, and 12. You would think that you wouldn't take it that hard being that young, but yeah, you definitely took it hard. I remember one of my cousins being up to bat in extra innings in, I think it was our first year. So we were 10 years old playing in the playoffs against 11 and 12-year-olds, and there was 2 outs, and my cousin was up. I don't want to mention his name, but we needed him to get a hit. And he struck out, which is really unfortunate. And I looked over, and he was actually, that kind of sums it up, how hard we took it. Was he's going to have to live with that for the rest of his life. And now we talk about it now, and we just kid about it and laugh about it. But boy, back then, that was something fierce, something serious as well. Moving on to 12 years old, that's when it all took place. We all knew we were being groomed to be our last year in Bronco League. So Jimbo, David, Kevin, Carl, all of us, the top 5, we were going to be the hitting machine. We were going to be unstoppable. The Orange Crush was going to be unstoppable. I remember, my dad first starting the season out. Back in the day, they had a soda can called the Orange Crush. And it was orange, and it had written on there, Orange Crush. So I don't know if it was myself or maybe one of my brothers or sisters that drank a can, and my dad's like, hey, give me that can. what are you going to do? So he washes it out and he puts it in a duffel bag and he takes it to practice. So we gather around every time before a game, before practice, after a game, would always take a knee and the coaches would talk to us. And I don't know what year it was, but my dad broke out the Orange Crush can. And that forever will go down in history as the Orange Crush can. Not sure where that can is today, but man, I remember seeing it, and I remember seeing it crushed, kicked. You know, there were some down times and there were some up times, and people would grab the cans. So, my dad being the head coach would give a game ball out each game to the player that he thought helped us win. You even got a game ball if you lost, and he just picked the player that he thought helped the most that game. But if you win the championship, if you win a playoff game, if you win something like that, you got a chance to run around the whole field holding the Orange Crush can. So that was a great feeling. I could remember when we won in 1978, we won the championship. We beat Ravens, and Carl grabbed that Orange Crush can, and he's like, "Follow me." We won the championship. Took a lap around the field. Fireworks were going off. People were yelling and screaming, and it was just a great feeling. And I could tell you the events leading up to that because I was heavily involved in that win. So I can go ahead and get to it and let you know, and I'll be back in a second. Welcome back to Right on the Mark with Mark Young, talking Bronco League today. I'd like to get right to it and get right to the last year that we played Bronco League, which was 12 years old, and the Orange Crush was steamrolling. We had a goal. Nobody was going to stop us. We had the team. It was built for our last year, and there was nothing going to stop us. And let me tell you, we went undefeated up until the last couple games where we ran into Yulba, where pitcher Craig, nobody could hit him. Pitcher Craig would throw the high heat, and you just stepped out of the box and you whiffed. That was basically it. A few people would hit Craig, but not many, and he beat us. And just the way it matched up, I never faced him. I was undefeated as a pitcher in my last year of Lou Dodge, but I never actually faced Craig with Yulba one-on-one when it counted. You always had to have a couple days rest once you pitched. So if you pitched on a Monday, you couldn't pitch Wednesday, you'd pitch on a Friday. So you could probably pitch twice a week, I think is what it was. But it was every other game. You needed so many days rest before you could pitch. That was just one of the rules that the coaches came up with. They had a set of rules that they set out at the beginning of the season, and they followed them. And one of them was you can't pitch your best pitcher every game. I don't even think you could do it every other game. Depending how your schedule was, you needed like 48 hours rest, something like that. But we steamrolled the regular season, and we went, I forget, whatever we were. Let's say we played 15 games, we lost one. So let's say we went 14-1. And that was that one loss to Yulba because I wasn't able to pitch, and we ran into Craig, who was the best pitcher in the league. I like to think that I was one of the best, probably top 3 pitchers. For right now, I can't think of the other pitcher. The name escapes me, but Craig was 1. I was probably 2, and I can't remember who was 3. But I don't know how many games he lost, but I didn't lose any that year. So it would have been interesting if I was able to face Craig one-on-one to see what team would have won. No telling what could have happened there. But the way it turned out, it's a double elimination playoff match. So the top 6 teams, I think, out of 8 made the playoffs. So the bottom 2 teams didn't make it. So the top 6 teams played a double elimination tournament. It taught a lot. Everything was played at Tot Lot. And I remember our first game was against our nemesis, the Ravens. They had my dad and Ravens coach Zeke were really good friends, and they had some camaraderie and a little jabbing back and forth where we're gonna beat you, we're gonna beat you, no, we're gonna take care of business. And I think we went into the game nonchalantly thinking we could just waltz right to the championship, and wouldn't you know it, Zeke's Ravens Green Machine beat us in game 1. I don't know what the score was, but they beat us. It could have been by 1 run. It could have been by 10 runs. It doesn't really matter. They won, and we went practically undefeated, and then we lose the first game in the playoffs. Are you kidding me? I'm like 3 years, and it came down to this. And I remember a speech that Jimbo's dad gave, Coach Jim gave us a speech at the end of that first game. And that was the only one I remember. He's like, fellas, keep your heads up walking up to the concession stand. You know why? Because it's double elimination. All you got to do is run the table and win the next games that you have. So that kind of stuck with me. Run the table. Don't look back. That's why it's a double elimination. You guys are still the best. You had a little hiccup. Just steamroll through the rest of it. So that resonated through the whole team, and I think we took that to heart. That was a wake up call for us. So had it been single elimination, Lou Dodge, the Orange Crush would have never been. Boy, that would have been tough. So game 2. I do want to mention that first game against the Ravens, I couldn't pitch because I wanted to sew up that number 1 seed during the regular season, so I couldn't pitch against the Ravens. But the next game we played the Elks, and I pitched, and I think I might have threw a 1-hitter, maybe a 2-hitter, but we just steamrolled them, and I can remember to this day we beat them 10-0. We just wiped them out. From then on out, we just steamrolled through until the game before the championship. We lost 1 game. The Ravens didn't lose any games. So we met the Ravens again in game 2 of the playoffs. Remember, double elimination. That was the game. We're fighting for our lives. I could remember one of the last innings. It might have been the last inning. We're down by 1 run. My cousin Kevin's on first base. My dad's coaching at third base. Coach Mike gives my cousin Kevin the still sign. He's still second. I step out of the batter's box, and it's a strike. I'm like, all right, that's strike 1. There's 1 out. My cousin Kevin's on second. No problem. All we need is 1 run to tie it up. We were one run down at the time. All we need to do is tie it up, and from there we could take it into extra innings, and then with the momentum, I think we could win. So this is the last inning. Kevin's on second, 1 out. I'm at bat. I saw the still signal out of the left-hand corner of my eye. My dad gave my cousin Kevin on second base. Like, well, that shouldn't be a problem. I'll step out of the batter's box again. I'll take a pass, won't swing. This way, whenever he comes to throw down to third, I'll be in his way and it'll be a harder throw for him. Well, I don't know who was catching at that time. I know Zeke was pitching. Zeke had an awesome curveball. I mean, it probably broke 2 feet when he threw it. So I was always afraid of his curveball because, man, you would just look silly. He would make you look silly up there sometimes if he threw you a change-up curve. He'd just be whiffing at the air like the ball's not even there. So I see Kevin taking off for third. Out of the corner of my eye, I hear my dad yell, hit it, which means slide. So Kevin slides. I step out, try to get in the catcher's way to obstruct the throw, and it just so happens that one of the coaches of the Ravens was an umpire at that point. I'm sorry, it was a brother of a coach of the Ravens that was umpire, because back then you just took friends that were umpiring, and it was hard to get umps, for 3, 4, 5 games a week. And I'll cut right to the chase. He called my cousin out at third base. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm already 2 strikes, no balls. Kevin got thrown out at third. He's upset. He kicked dust on umpire Ricky. Don't want to say his last name, but I'm pretty sure you all know who I'm talking about. He kicked dust on him and ran into the dugout, and there was 2 outs. And we're down 1 run with nobody on. And I'm at bat. So I prepared myself. I'm like, I got to be prepared if I make this last out to live with this for the rest of my life. That Lou Dodge, who we built for 3 years, to live the rest of my life knowing that I lost to the Ravens and I was the one that struck out to end the game, because I'm pretty sure they're going to be celebrating. I already know they're getting the soda cans out. They're getting all the concession stand gear ready to go, and the fireworks are getting ready to start. So I had that in the back of my mind. But the next pitch I took, and it was a ball. The next pitch after that, I was praying for something fast. I was hoping it wasn't a curveball. And it was. It was a fastball. High fastball from Zeke. I'll take it. Took a swing. Got a single right up the middle. Right then and there, I knew nothing was stopping me. I was going to steal second. I'm still in third. And I'm pretty sure my dad's going to send me home to tie this sucker up so we can get it into extra innings and just get this over with. So I get on base. I get the first single. My dad gives me the still signal. Well, I was going either way. It didn't really matter. I didn't really pay attention to the signals. I was going anyway. So I took off for second, and I could hear in the background, "Go, Beef, go, go." Took off, wasn't even close. I don't even know if the catcher even threw the ball because I was already on second. So I was going to go from second to third, but one of my good friends, Scott, was up next. He was up next, and it wasn't a great hitter, a little below average hitter. But he got wood on a ball, sent it into right field, a little blooper right over the second baseman's head, right in front of the right fielder. And I was cruising around third and headed for home, stepped on home plate to tie that sucker up. After that, it was all history. We went into extra innings, and then we scored 3 or 4 runs. We had to hold the Ravens for the next for the next inning, and they couldn't score at all. So we went home with the victory. So now we have 1 loss, still have 1 loss, and the Ravens now have 1 loss. So remember, it's double elimination. So we have to play 1 more game. Insane, I know, but you have to do it. So I can remember just going game after game after game, and my neighbors, they were redoing our street back then, and we'd have to walk to our car, and the neighbors would be like, "What game's this? What game's that?" And I remember the last and final championship game we were going to. My dad's like, "This is the championship game. This decides all the marbles. It's the rubber match." And we got there. We both had 1 loss. I didn't pitch that game because I had pitched the game before. We needed the win. My dad was a firm believer in there's no tomorrow if we don't win today. So he wasn't going to save my pitching for the last game. He said, "Mark, if we don't win today, there is no championship game. So why am I going to save you for tomorrow? There's no reason to save you for tomorrow because tomorrow might not come if we lose today." Very direct told me that. And that's how he was back then. And, he told you how he felt. And if you did something wrong, you paid for it. I mean, didn't matter if you were his son, didn't matter if you were his nephew, didn't matter. If he was on his team and you weren't doing something right, you're running a lap. As a matter of fact, if 2 or 3 people were goofing around, you all ran a lap. You just couldn't take it serious enough. And we could all respect that. To this day, we talk about it, but we could respect that. So the championship game, the double elimination game, finally came to a head, and we just beat the Ravens by, 2 or 3 runs. It was a close game up until the end, and I could remember my friend Carl hitting a home run, and it was dead center. I swear the ball didn't leave 6 feet off the field, and the fence might have been 6 foot. He just hit a line shot straight center field, and Carl was a beast. He was a big guy, and man, could he run. He was probably the fastest on the team. I always said that was one of my strengths, but no, Carl was the fastest on the team. He beat everybody in a race, and he's probably the strongest on the team as well. And and he had an attitude. So when we won that championship game, there was no doubt Carl was going to take lead. I can remember once we got the final out, Carl grabbing the Orange Crush can. And he's like, "Follow me, we're taking a lap." Fireworks are going off. Dogs are barking. People are rushing the field. It was like, I'd compare it to a Second World War coming to Totlot. I mean, it was like coming to an end, like banners. We had streamers thrown on the field. We had people lighting M80s. We had fireworks going off, firecrackers, people yelling, screaming. As a matter of fact, the houses nearby were coming and telling us to keep it down because their dogs were going crazy. And you couldn't hear what they were saying. People had those air whistles, the air horns. It was just massive chaos is the only way I could describe it. I don't have it on videotape. I'm not sure if we had videos back then. I'm pretty sure we did, but I don't think anybody had time to just take videotape footage of it. So I could still close my eyes and see it in my mind of what a game it was and what a celebration it was afterwards. We finally won the championship, the 1978 Lou Dodge Championship. And to this day, we talk about it, how the Orange Crush beat the Green Machine. Man, and Zeke is still around. I don't see him very often, but I hear about Zeke, and I just think about the game when he had a chance to get me out. But I talked to him years afterward, and he's like, "Wow, Mark, I wish I knew you couldn't hit a curveball. I'd have just threw you hanging curves the whole batting time." I'm like, "Well, I couldn't tell you that." But it was, the way it came out is fine, but man, it was rough getting there. But, that just goes to show you can't take something for granted. can't take anything for granted as far as that goes. But what a day that was. And I remember shortly after that, my dad passing around the game ball, and it was a brand new ball. He had all of us sign it. So I signed it as Beef as one of my nicknames. One of Carl's nickname was Killer. So I still have the ball. It says Killer. It says Beef. It says Kevin. There's one that says Slugger. We had a girl on our team, Allison, and she could hit. And, she called herself Slugger. We called her Slugger. She even signed her name Slugger to the ball. So to this day, I have the ball. It's showcased. I do have the scorebook, so I could always go back and reflect on, how the games went. And I do want to point this out. It was just 40 years ago, 1978, 40 years ago, we had just won the championship. So my dad, Coach Young, he'd call me up weekly and say, guess what? Name was in the paper. Mark, you went 4 for 4. Kevin went 3 for 4. Jimbo threw a no-hitter. David went for 3 singles. And every week there was something in the paper 40 years ago of us winning, except the championship. It never made the paper for some reason. I like to think that Zeke put the kibosh on it because Zeke still lives in Monessen, and he knows. I'm sure he reads the paper and he knows what to expect with that. But the thing I wanted to point out is it never made the paper. So people that were reading it probably don't know who won. But 40 years ago, I remember, and people in that moment remember. What a great moment it was. One sad note I do want to mention is Coach Zeke did pass away over the summer of 2018. So I was very sad to see that. However, I did write up a nice condolence online for him. And in the end, I actually said that Green Machine versus Orange Crush will never die. Rest in peace, Coach Zeke. That stirred up a lot of memories. 40 years later, he passes away on the anniversary of the championship game. That is something to think about. And, I told my dad whenever I talked to him on the phone, I'm like, you're one of the only coaches left. You're the only coach left from the Orange Crush. And you're one of the only coaches left almost in the league. My dad was younger than a lot of the other coaches, maybe by 3 or 4 years or whatever. But I'm always reminded of that he still has the memories, and, we could sound that off each other and we could talk about it a lot. So that's all I really have on my podcast today. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, this is Right on the Mark by Mark Young.